Welcome, folks, to the 18th annual Platterbone Plattershard Tournament of the Delmarin League. This is Blake Sternham coming at you through glorious wizard vision, brought to you by Hellborn's Heliadogs and the West Delmarin Trade Company. I'm joined today by Gib the Throat Cutter. Hi, Gib.
Hail and well met, Blake. It is a joy to be here, and may I just take this opportunity to praise the true gods of the realm, the Counterweight Triad and the Beige Bishop.
Sacrilegious but tolerable on this beautiful Platterbone day, Gib. We're in the semi-finals now, and it's down to two incredible teams. The Kingdom of Lids Lidders of the Pack versus our very own Unfettered League's Defiant Giants. Brock Stelfen is the new coach for the Giants following the mysterious dissolution of the former coach, Lars Shardsmith, and he brings with him a whole new coaching style.
Lars Shardsmith dissolved just last Siednost, and they were not quick in replacing him, Blake. They search high and low for a new coach.
Low in this case, Gib, Brock's being a dwarf.
An amusing observation. I must say the Lidders are looking particularly menacing this morning. They've replaced two defense players with relative unknowns. A tiefling from the Sigiliac provinces, Derek Nobinson, and Darlinga Naboye, a gnome. A controversial choice for those of us who remember the ravages of the gnome plague. I recall scores of throats cut in those glorious days, the cobblestones slick with gnome blood and viscera. But the critical question today is, will this abomination turn on us and work tirelessly to fix the world around it, causing mayhem and misery?
Well, abomination is a strong word, and I do have friends who happen to be gnomes, but the question is a good one. Sorcerer researchers at the South Heliakon Liberation University posit the existence of evil humors deep in the blood. It's been suggested these may be strongest in the consociate's degenerate rulers, the twin Connards, but I'm no medicine man, and we're here to enjoy the game. What say thee?
The Lidders and the Giants are both strong this season, so it's anyone's game. But look, seems like it's time for the national anthem, Freedom's Illustrious Declaration. We'll be back right after, folks.
Verily, let us stand to the anthem. Remember, folks, ain't no dog like Hellborn's Heliadog. Hellborn's Heliadog is the dog that will keep barking in your stomach for days. Stay tuned for more after this. Describe me as the ultimate blend of comfort and style.
Is similar to like one of those leather wallets that they sell you? Yes.
On a chain.
No, I see more of those like leather wallets that goes soft and slightly sort of leg shaped.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cut you off. I'm going to have to cut you off right there. Nothing about me is soft. I want our listeners to know that I am rock hard 24/7. A virile man with testosterone literally squirting out of all of my pores. Welcome to episode 7 of Mythtakes Happen. This episode is going to be a little bit different than our usual episodes. It has a different format. This one is more conversational. We've come to about halfway through this incredible season, and we are going to make some connections between bits and pieces, but we're going to talk it out rather than sort of follow our usual format. Let's see where it takes us.
There's another reason why this is a slightly different type of episode, in that this is our second crack at it.
This is our second crack at it, so it turns out that both Melbourne Internet and Adelaide Internet are cursed, and the recording that was the initial recording that we did had so much lag and so much of this sound that unfortunately could not be used.
It's one of those joys of creation. Mistakes happen. Mythtakes happen.
And Mythtakes happen. Oh, you did it. I love it when like movies do that, or TV shows, or if you have like a cartoon and one of the characters is humming the theme. Now that's cool.
Yes, it is fun.
I believe last time we had a chat about what we're going to talk about. What have you got for me, Aaron? Give me your load.
I have two topics, broad topics that I want to talk about, and they are gods and the nature of their creation, destruction, existence, and somewhat to a lesser extent the religions around them. And I want to talk about wraithquartz.
Wraithquartz. This is really good. I'm very excited for this. My notes had sort of the rarity, difficulty, and scope of magic, the Cold War mentality of mistrust and secrecy. I also had sort of, perhaps we'll get to it, perhaps we won't this episode, chat about the rulership of the great consociate empire, the twin Connards, and how they work and all of that. Let's talk about gods. Let's talk about gods, baby.
This is where, let's talk about gods, baby. Let's talk about... Yeah. So, where we got to last time as I started talking about the gods, and that's where we realized that this was not going going to work. So
that's where it all went wrong.
Record scratch.
Yeah.
So a little bit of this you've already heard, but I don't think it'll be too much before we can actually have a conversation about it. So where I started on this meditation of the gods was actually with some of your writing from episode 2, I think it was, when you were talking about Groovold. So I'm actually going to read that
was episode
chunk out.
3.
3.
Wasn't it? Yeah, Groovold. Minions Rise of Groovold.
Very, very great reference there. Love the film. So I'm actually going to read the little chunk out again just to remind our listeners and yourself and a little bit myself about what's we've already agreed is sort of canonically the case. And then I want to sort of expand on it and chat with you about where we're going with gods in the world of Heliakon and Delmarin.
Absolutely brilliant. Go ahead.
Gods. They're real. One can potentially learn the secret paths which lead to their divine realms and commune with the deities face to face. Gods are rarely eternal, however, and there are a few divinities in the world which claim to have had a hand in its creation. Theologians assert that gods rise to prominence in order to fill archetypal role vacuums created by the passing, slaying, or banishment of other gods. It is claimed that great heroes of the age before became gods through extraordinary deeds which elevate them above the base natures of lesser folk. Academics argue that in a way, each champion, reaver, adventurer, conqueror, monster, and exemplar is set always on a path at the end of which lies the possibility of godhood.
However unlikely it may be. Now, otherwise, everyone would be becoming a god. I'd love to be one. I think I'd do a really good job.
I think you'd be an exciting god.
Yeah.
Responsible and cruel. Since we've already established that magic is created and is of life and art and emotions, and on the other side of this veil, I'm suggesting that that is the realm in which gods naturally exist, and that in the realm of magic, this life and art and emotion form these knots, these vortices of thoughts and feelings and ideas about something, a very broad something, a concept or a story or an explanation for something. And every time somebody in the really real world has a emotional or thoughtful reaction to that something, whether they're cursing the broken heart or aching to once more be in the excitement of battle, trying to explain to somebody else why the seasons turn and the tides come in and out, maybe they're telling the story of a halfling folk hero, but adapting it to the current political climate. All of those things create a vortex of power and magic in the realm of magic. Now, we've sort of already said that our cycle of magic is somewhat reciprocal, that as things die and are born and emotions are had in the really real world, this causes magic and also the formation of wraithquartz. That this reciprocal nature means that these locuses, this collection of power, starts influencing the world. It wants to build itself up, not out of any will, just that's the sort of physics of this.
Okay, yeah. So it's like a natural process, right? Because it's like self-perpetuating. It wants to make more of itself. It wants to live.
Exactly. It's got momentum, and it's just building momentum. And if individuals start to fit into those roles, if they are in through their actions and their own thoughts and so forth, start to improve on that, they become correlated with it. They become closer to it. With the idea being that the culmination of that process is that when they die and no longer have a physical form, and whatever life, magic, and so forth that's within them would then move on in the normal way, is instead becomes part of this vortex, and that's when it gains intentionality and it becomes a god.
Now, I think I made the point in our last failed recording that some of the, I suppose, physics of this do remind me a little bit of the warp, but it is also quite different. Do you remember a game a while back? I think you do remember. It's called Unknown Armies. Do you remember that one?
Yes.
So in that game, it was a game of modern magic, and a lot of, I don't remember the terminology, but the sort of magic users there were propelled by being the archetypes of particular things, and the more they acted like that archetype, the more powerful they became in that archetype, which is a little bit similar, I think, to what you're suggesting here.
I'm absolutely drawing a little bit from Unknown Armies. There's a great deal of Terry Pratchett notion of gods, that humans create gods rather than vice versa in there.
I think that really works. Yeah. I have a question for you. How this might work. So let's say that a great hero, is set on that pathway to becoming a god. They are they perform great deeds. They are, I suppose, by the momentum of that magic, they are propelled forward to become more of whatever that is. How do they feel about it? Do they know about it? What happens to them? Like, one of the sort of ideas that I've had this entire time since we talked about someone setting out on the pathway to divinity has been the sort of flips, like the horror flip side of that, if that makes sense. Like, if they find themselves becoming more and more one thing, but it's not a fully conscious, a fully their own willpower thing. What happens? Is it a personality death? Are they being replaced by these ideas? What's happening at that stage?
So the third influence that I want to bring up is the it's a White Wolf game style.
Ooh, okay. Yes, please. Please do that.
It's got a real fun thing where you play the children of the gods of human pantheons, and a great deal of their power comes from their legend. And part of the horror of the games, because White Wolf games do tend to have the horror element to them, is that your legend forces you to act in a way that supports your legend. You start losing the ability to make choices entirely of your free will, that the world pushes you and forces you to make legendary choices. And part of this process that I'm describing, where there's locus of power within the magic world, it wants through momentum, so it doesn't have a want precisely, just through momentum. You'll become associated with it. That individual starts gaining power from it, which is to say the world around them is subtly manipulated in such a way to make them more like this locus of power wants them to be.
Aaron, so in the case of the god that we've talked, I think, the most about, Gruvold, right? One of the things that he was about is, like, he was the leader and, I suppose, transformer of his nation, right? So at a certain point, his words would have more weight, for example, right? Like, the world would sort of bend or trend more towards people being inspired by the things that he says or does.
When he was fighting at the head of battles, because he's a god of soldiers and monks and freedom, well, slavery, anti-slavery kind of freedom anyway.
His anti-slavery.
Sort of, I suppose, civilization might be a better way of putting it.
I think civilization works, yeah.
So when he's leading a battle of soldiers and so forth, that locus of power that he's beginning to associate with, that would later make him a god, is what nudges him so that the enemy commander and Gruvold would run into one another, and in such a way that it is a easily seen and reportable fight.
That's you're adding metatextual narrative weight to this process.
Indeed, one of the points I want to bring up is that I don't want to make it like a rule for playing within Heliakon, but it's something that GMs might, and players to a less extent, want to keep in mind, that one of the reasons that the player characters are always at the pivotal moments is that, just like you wrote in that little introduction piece that I read, that every adventurer, every reaver and so forth is always on a little bit of a path towards godhood, and that one of the reasons that they do keep running into strange things, they're always at the right place, that they're always at the crux of whatever major issue is going on, is because that is literally how the metaphysics of the world works.
Yeah, I really like that. And I've always been quite enamored with that idea of when we play characters, even when we play in a really sort of low and dirty setting where we're like, I don't know, a rat catcher's best friend or something like that, that the act of us playing it and being in that story is what makes our actions in the world matter, and it is what makes the world around us happen at the time that it's happening, right?
In some ways, the player of each character is a little bit like the locus of magic that is pushing the characters in the direction they want them to go.
What a beautiful notion. I really like that.
Which is not to suggest that everybody who plays in Heliakon or Delmarin will become a god of any description.
In fact, it would be extremely unlikely.
But I sort of drifted a little away from one of your questions.
Let's go.
Which was about the limitation of free will and how well known is this. I would suggest, and I'm happy to disagree, that the idea that gods come from people, that the vast majority of gods that are known were all once mortal and have become gods, and that they die, is a commonly known fact. But the mechanism about how one's become a god is known to to incredibly few people.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like that kind of works. I think that's a sort of awareness about the world that people could have, a belief that, someone from it. I mean, it's the whole idea of like a culture hero as well, right? Like our culture heroes, we think about them, and over time, even, some of them become saints or gods or whatever over time. And I think people being sort of aware of that, this was just an ordinary man, but now blah, I think that's a great idea. I think that works. Yeah, for sure. But as for free will, Aaron, could you define on this podcast, does free will exist in the real world, and who gave it to us? Was it God?
I am not going to go into depth, but I would suggest that free will does exist in the sense that we make choices, but that it is also deterministic, because all the things that lead up to us making that choice, if they could be understood, would force only one choice.
Okay.
That's not to say that we don't have free will. It's just that our notion of free will needs to incorporate determinism, which is a bit of a head buggery. And
so is it okay? I'm going to say it. You heard it on this podcast first, folks.
Yes,
there is no God. Life is pointless. Leave your faith, leave your church. Just go out and become a cannibal.
I highly encourage you to find a good way to live. I personally don't believe that there are any deities, but if whatever you choose to live makes you a good person, then be that. And probably don't worship Chris. He would be a terrible guy.
Definitely don't do that. That's look, I do feel like I might be a figure of, a divine figure in the future, perhaps. You never know. L. Ron Hubbard, he wrote that book. And then,
yes, he did.
And now a very successful and real church of Scientology. Oh, by the way, I was going to tell you, I've become a Scientologist, Aaron, and I've been detecting too many thetans around you. Which I haven't read a lot about it. I think they're like fetuses, but with a TH sound. So don't. I think you should wash more.
Okay.
There's also this guy. His name is Xenu. He's just a bad guy, and I think something about
I saw him
airplanes.
in the Marvel film. Really great actor. He wears a sort of odd balaclava mask when he's kicking butt. That's Zemo. So yes, I think we've got a good sort of life cycle of gods. Oh, sorry, death. I think we didn't talk about death.
Well, let's talk about death, and that I'm still scared of becoming a god, right? Like that idea of like I'm still worried about that. I think that there's like an interesting scope there to talk about or create gods who, before their ascension or whatever, really, really didn't want to become gods and then became gods. What does that do to a person? Something bad, probably, maybe.
I definitely think there is a very fascinating story that is a little, now I'm thinking about it, there's a little bit of the original Dune books in there too.
Oh, yes.
This idea that you've suddenly found yourself at the tip of a wave of momentum and it is pushing you towards godhood. It is very Paul Atreides. I'm a little iffy about this, and if we don't decide on it today, that's fine. The death of a god is the death of the sapient soul that took up residence within the locus and certainly changed it and became it. That when that dies, you get what you described in the Stygiad, these dead gods.
I think actually you described the dead gods in the Stygiad, but yeah.
Oh yeah.
I described the Stygiad Council, here's an interesting thing. So I like this, and I like where this is going. I just had this thought, right? Like, clearly a god should be able to kill another god, right?
Yes.
Right? Like, should that happen? It should be rare enough, I suppose, that it's not constantly happening, and then the most powerful god is not the god of murder.
We also want the rare occasions when people, our heroes or villains to a lesser extent, kill gods.
Yes. Or when people stop believing in that god, right? Like, not even its central ideas. I feel like if people stop believing in its central ideas, then that could cause a death or like a change of the god, a changeover, changing of the guard type thing.
Yes. Once you've become a god, you've got a very specific correlation. You've got rituals and places to go and groups to go with when you're thinking about that god. If you manage to...
So you're extremely powerful in a very narrow way.
Yes. If you manage to divert people sufficiently so that their thoughts and feelings and emotions and life aren't going in the direction of that locus anymore, it will weaken to the point where potentially it'll just starve to death.
That's right,
or killed by something else. I think that's probably certainly one of the methods, but I am definitely thinking about, we are talking about a fantasy game,
It's a fantasy game. We have to plan for the players to say to the GM, we really want to kill God. We can't do it in real life, so please can we act in this game to do that?
What I'm thinking, because of the question that you asked, God killing God and so forth, what if this vortex of godly energy influences the realm of magic around it to the point where that it becomes aspected, it becomes that God's heaven, for lack of a better word, afterlife?
Okay, yeah. That sounds interesting.
So it's at its most powerful when it is acting within that realm. People, sapients and so forth, can go to that realm through extraordinarily rare magics, putting something physical in the magic world. There they can strike directly at the heart of the powerful godlike creature and kill the life, intentionality mind at the heart of this locus without necessarily destroying the locus.
Yeah. I think then that leaves it ripe for what happens then? How long does it take for another one to replace that? Yeah.
Very definitely don't want war is a single idea and there's only ever a single vortex about war, and that's where all war thoughts go, because humans are far more complicated, messy and weird than that. All right, we can explore a bit more of that later. Perhaps we can talk about what actually happens when the ages turn and the gods die en masse.
That's an interesting one, yeah. And, gentle listener, it turns out that we never did discuss it, but perhaps we will discuss it in a future episode. Okay, I want to talk, because I think my topic about magic and its rarity, difficulty, and scope, I think it actually fits into this one a little bit. And I want this part to be more of a conversation between you and me, I guess in terms of when we first were talking about our world, right? We had very few sort of framework ideas of what we wanted to look like. And I feel over time, over these 6 episodes coming up to, episode 7 now, I think that idea has changed somewhat. I think that we've probably pushed the tech level and magic level a little higher than we were talking. Not a lot higher, but I remember we distinctly had a conversation, we want to leave the feel of it at around, was it a 12th century type?
Yeah, and I don't think the tech level's been pushed much personally, but I agree we've definitely added a bit more magic than I think we were.
Yeah, magic. And I think, I think in my head at the very least, magic changes a setting, right? Because in the real world, there is no magic. Our magic was, I suppose, technological developments and things like that. And we did say at the start that magic is rare and difficult to use and costly and stuff like that. How rare is it, Aaron? How rare is it? If we go to Heliakon, right? How many wizards are we going to meet? So there's low level stuff. We're talking about the Guild of Conductors, right? They're obviously working with some level of magic there, right?
Yes, but the bulk
that
of
level
their
of
magic
doesn't, right? That level of magic doesn't change. It's entertainment. It doesn't change the world in a hugely major way. They're not going to go out there and, I don't know, start a technological revolution or a magical revolution even, because again, the scope of what they do is extremely narrow. It's extremely narrow. But then we're talking about we had these chats about the Vesta and the different and I mean even the Brackenbards, right? Those seem like sort of higher level potentially magically effects, right? What does that mean for the world, right? So that's what I want to talk about with you.
One of the things that when I came up with particularly the Brackenbards, that they've got a very strong negative to them, that if you're an actual Brackenbard, everything you say is sung and has potential to become truth. It's a limiting factor. I suppose it's been my idea about keeping magic capped or limited, why it doesn't solve all the world's problems, in that it always comes with either both limitations on what it can do and the cost of magic is high. Now, I have actually been keeping in my noggin an idea about how to keep all our wizards and the use of wraithquartz from becoming too powerful, for lack of a better phrase.
Can I have a guess? Can I have a guess what it is? Cancer.
No, but not too far off, because the reason I haven't brought it up is that it's frankly largely mechanical rules-based system that is still, obviously reflected in the world, that the only way to access the magic from wraithquartz, which is the modern innovation that has allowed magic to be more than just rituals with lots of bloodletting, requires the wizard or whatever they are to sacrifice, because remember, the bloodletting and life and having a connection to magic is what allows you to do magic, is they have to sacrifice a little bit of blood in themselves to the wraithquartz. Every time you cast a spell, you're losing a hit point equal to the level of the spell you're casting. And everybody knows wizards don't have a lot of hit points to go around.
Yes. Okay.
Yep.
You know what? I like that, because to me, that idea, that concept that you just came up with, it's a very old school D&D concept that feels really good to me. I remember we were talking in one of the earlier episodes about some of the more like old school revival type games like White Hack and such. And in that, like you can start off with like a wizard and he's got like 3 or 4 hit points, and one of the ways of casting magic is to use your hit points for casting.
It's not dissimilar to that, and it's not exactly fair. That's kind of the thing we're going for, that magic can do things that no one else can do, but it costs you your life. It puts your life at risk. Sort of contextually within the world of Heliakon and Delmarin and so forth, you can say, well, yes, I can ask a Vesta to come and repair my door for me, but what I'm actually doing is I'm asking them to use up wraithquartz, which requires osmotes to sacrifice portions of their souls to fill it up. That Vesta has to come out, look at this particular thing and go, all right, I know how to do that. I need to adjust this hyper complicated spell in my head to make sure it goes correctly, because there's always the risk that I say something wrong and magic goes awry. And then 3, they're asking me to literally bleed for them to fix a door. Hire a damn carpenter.
You know what? That actually answers my question really neatly. And I think that actually changes my view of what we've created so far in a very positive way. So that's really good. Like the more stuff that we come up with, I just keep thinking about those things in isolation, I suppose. But then I think about those things interacting with each other. We have quite a few, like when we talk about like artifacts and we talk about magical effects and things that happen in some ways in my head. It sort of like changed the world into being, I'm not talking like it didn't suddenly become Eberron or something like that, but it did go like quite a bit higher. But now from this perspective, I quite like it. One of the notes I had was, what do you think about this? Magic as the province of the wealthy class. One of the things I feel like about magic is that it does require a lot of study and a lot of resources to train a magic user and things like that. So generally, you wouldn't have orphans off the street learning cantrips, whereas people like nobles, priests, merchant princes, perhaps, would have more opportunity for that kind of thing. Does that sort of make sense?
Is the short answer. The longer answer is, because it's a fantastic question.
Yeah.
For a start, I'd say we want to keep wizardry as our primary and most common and socially acceptable form of magic. That, yes, all the various forms of wizardry require an enormous amount of study and wraithquartz, both of which are expensive. And because they're expensive and because it's costly in terms of osmotes' life and the life of each type of wizard, that their services are also consequently expensive. That's how supply and demand works. But also, the types of magic that are not wizardry currently feel rather counterculture. The Brachenbards are not particularly common. 7 years to become one, and they are of a culture and tradition that is fading, not maliciously, just that's the nature of things. That the symphomorphologists are their own. They're not counterculture, but they're also not entirely normally within the culture. They've sort of got the role of Dunnican divers and priests. They're sort of somewhat separate. And I feel a bit weird putting those two things in the same category, but I hope people understand. I think that makes a lot of sense. Okay, yeah. I suppose also, like, we're talking about a long ago analog world. There's probably not a lot of social movement either. So, no.
But there is scope, I think, like you said, and especially for player characters. We need to have the scope for either, extraordinary individuals, people who break the mold. They exist, and what we were talking about before, that kind of like the narrative momentum of being main characters.
Does literally within the world actually have a mechanical reason why it's altering the world, that they've got a ball bearings that are of a matte gravity on the world.
We did it. We did it. We've done it. Talk about, I want to know about what you want to talk about, wraithquartz. I'm really excited about this.
Before I get too stuck into this, I want to give a little shout out to our good friend Leonidas, because I was chatting with some of the earlier episodes with him, and he brought up some of these ideas.
Is that true? Perhaps we should have him on one of these episodes.
I absolutely insist we do. You guys would love him. I call him Leonidas. It's not his actual name, but the only thing stopping him from becoming like a hero king of old, given his charisma and intelligence and physicality, is just because we don't have hero kings of now.
I mean, I love him a lot. Yeah. There's nothing else. There's no funny joke to go with that. He's just a very lovable man and just an incredible human being.
Truly.
But actually, you know what? I don't want to oversell it. He's good. He's good.
So, the quality of wraithquartz. Wraithquartz is miraculous and terrible, and has, within the context of our world, relatively recently changed how magic is understood. But the people of Delmarin are only just beginning to learn the extent of which they do not yet really understand wraithquartz, how its nature changes depending on how it forms, and the nature and temperaments of any osmotes. So I've got a bunch of bullet points here to chat with you about.
Shoot those bullet points into me.
Do you like how you make me uncomfortable? Wraithquartz is better when it grows to a certain size. The longer you leave wraithquartz to grow, the bigger it gets, and there's sort of a exponential amount of magic that wraithquartz can hold depending on its size. That once you've mined it, once you've taken it from the place where it is forming, it will slowly begin to degrade unless you put magic into it. You use osmotes to fill it with magic. At that point, it will then stick around with magic in it for an extremely long period of time without now self-sustaining at that point, because it's full of life magic coolness. Yeah.
Oh, it's like, you know what it is? It's like, when people make those, what are those things called? The jars with the little ecosystems in them, and they're self-sustaining ecosystems. Yeah, it's like that.
The reason I want to suggest this is that it changes how the wraithquartz supply works. So you've got a mine full of wraithquartz. Cool, neat. You've then got to make a decision about, do I leave them for longer to have larger crystals so that we can store more in them? On the other hand, there's lots of utility in medium-sized ones and even smaller ones. But once you've gone ahead and mined it, you then need to get some osmotes and put magic in it fairly quickly. You can't just mine them, put them on a shelf and wait till you've got enough people willing to sacrifice their very souls and life to fill it with magic. So there's this bottleneck's not quite the right word, but there's a delicate balance in the supply side of wraithquartz.
Okay, that's really interesting. Yeah, and I think that makes it. I mean, it's still a little bit an analog for mining, right? Like, because you're still mining this stuff. Oh, actually, I think it's actually a pretty good one, because not only are you mining this out of the earth, you're also ruining something.
It also adds another element to the competition between the Great Consociate and the Unfettered League, in that the areas beneath the deep vaults
the deep vaults. Yeah, we've got the shallows, we've got the mid vaults, we've got the world's grave layer, and beyond, the core of the earth.
But we've already established that there's plenty of wraithquartz in there, because Heliakon has been a place of sapient civilization for cycle after cycle, millennia. But the thing is that your delvers from the Great Consociate, you find a catacomb or something, and it is just covered in wraithquartz crystal. Brilliant, you think, fantastic, we're rich. But if you mine everything, if you go in there and you stuff your bags full and other bits and pieces and you drag all this stuff back, you've then got a bit of a problem. You've now got huge amounts of wraithquartz that need a lot of osmotes in a hurry, or they're going to start disintegrating. Do you then actually just mine a handful of it and try to keep its location secret and hope nobody from the Unfettered League or a third party finds it, so that you can only use the parts that you've got and get top price and top dollar? If you put a glut of it in the market, you're going to lose some of it to this disintegration process.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Then you've got this location that needs to be protected from the other side, even though it's in a tremendously dangerous area. I just think it adds an element of, as I say, delicate balance and potential conflict.
Yeah. That's a lot of things on the plate. A lot of plates on the thing. What's the saying? A lot of spinning plates.
Yes, more spinning plates in the air or something like that. So wraithquartz is formed when when life moves in or out of the plane of magic through the veil. But what I'm going to suggest is that the nature of the magic that is passing through that creates the wraithquartz can aspect it slightly or greatly, and allowing it to store and or flavor the magic. So store different types of magic better than others and flavor the magic that's stored within it. I'll talk more about those in a little bit, but
before,
we've already...
Aaron,
yes?
before you go anymore, we have actually defined the various types of wraithquartz already. Crap quartz of the ghouls. I believe recently we talked about slime quartz.
Yes.
In a bonus episode.
Yes. Please do check out our bonus episodes.
That's right. And then keep going.
So
cool.
I'm not bringing anything new to the table here. I just sort of wanted to codify that. So you agree with that notion that...
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I think it works. It works very well.
I do like the idea of potentially even coming up with some names. So slime quartz and crap quartz, two ones we've already just come up with organically, as it were.
That's it. Haha. Organically. You know what I like? I have this image. Do you remember David Gemmel's Substrasi books with the
No. I haven't read those at all.
The John Shano books, the ones where he's like a cowboy. And, anyway, so there's like these, So
blood crystals?
Bloodstones, I think.
Bloodstones? Yeah.
Yeah. I think like the cool fantasy name for that was the Substrasi, which is so cool. Basically, every one of his stories was exactly the same, which I really enjoyed. So he used a lot of the same kind of ideas through various books, and the Substrasi were one of them. And it was essentially this stone that came with like these golden veins in it, and it was how you would do magic, and it would grant your wish. It would somehow change the world, and these golden threads would sort of disappear as the stone ran out of power. And then they were so extremely rare that, like, if you were a ruler or something like that and you ran out of power, you were like, oh my god, no one's going to listen to me anymore. There was something that you could do about it, which is to feed it blood, and then it became the bloodstone, which worked exactly the same, except that it also corrupted you, made you more bloodthirsty, or something like that. But I like the idea of having some more sort of like negative versions of the wraithquartz, which don't initially appear negative, because obviously no one would willingly just be like, I'm gonna go insane now.
About that, the nature and mood of osmotes that you're using to fill a wraithquartz with magic, their willingness or lack thereof, their general temperament, demeanor, personality, that sort of thing, flavors the magic. And that there are certain flavors or resonances of magic are better for certain tasks. If you've got a type of wraithquartz that resonates with that magic, then you can put more of that resonance into it. So you've got a wraithquartz that formed specifically after an enormous battle, like the Bloody Avenues engagement. Thousands of people die. That rush of death energy creates a whole stack of wraithquartz that is aspected specifically towards violence. You then get a bunch of warriors and angry people and so forth, and you use them as your osmote. You're going to fit more magic into that wraithquartz.
That's the resonance. That's its aspect. Yeah. A wrathful aspect.
Yes. And that if you try to use a healing spell out of that, it's going to cost you more. You're trying to go against the resonance. Maybe the Vaestra has to take more of their own life energy to make it work. However, if they want to use it to, I don't know, make a big telekinetic fist to punch people in the face with, that's easier. It costs less. All right. Can wraithquartz passively store magic without osmotes?
If that magic, that mystic stuff that's coming out of that dimensional hole or whatever, can that leak out naturally, right? I mean, that's what you're asking essentially.
Yeah.
I think in rare cases it should be able to, right? Because it's like, I don't think it would be very common, but I think it would be, you know, like how there's some places in the world that just have like an excess of a particular mineral or a particular like radioactivity, like natural radioactivity or whatever, because of like where they are and the different pressures that beneath the earth and stuff like that. So yeah, well, I mean, I say why not? I mean, yeah, it works for me.
I kind of like it for the notion that yes, that if finding
it could happen,
yeah. So I mean, like if your adventurers are finding and they find, you know, wraithquartz, cool, neat. But the next step in making wraithquartz actually useful and valuable is to use osmote to fill it with magic. And that's a whole process that generally requires a society. It's kind of hard for an individual, not impossible, just hard for an individual to find a bunch of guys and either get them to volunteer or chain them up and use them as osmotes.
Definitely.
But if you're adventuring and you find wraithquartz already filled with natural magic and so forth, it's a very valuable and an amazing find.
Yeah, as long as it's not something where we say, where we'd have it in every single story that we say, that we have something like that popping up, it would be fine. Because I think the real world is filled with so many incredible natural coincidences. It would be really weird to rob our own world of that possibility as well.
Good call. One of the notions that Leo and I spoke about was that if resonance are a thing and a different, we actually already talked about how the Unfettered League and the Great Conversational Empire use osmotes in different ways. That in the Great Conversational Empire, it's a way of the unprivileged from earning a great deal of money, whereas within the Unfettered League, there was a sort of self-sacrifice notion
that kind
to
of
it.
aspect. And I think during the war, we talked about they had like a lottery for it, didn't they?
Yes. And then there's the idea of using prisoners of war in a much more immoral fashion. So given that each side uses wraithquartz differently and uses their osmotes differently, which means that each side is going to end up with a surplus of one kind of resonance within their wraithquartz and a deficit in other forms, in which case there can be a black market in trade of these rare and valuable wraithquartz between the two sides, perhaps.
Okay. Yeah. I think that works. When I look at the modern world, we are so interconnected, right? So if we have countries that are potentially at war or are opposed to each other, and they still trade with each other and stuff like that. But in a sort of D&D past world that we're living in, fantasy, I don't want to say quite medieval, but maybe whatever the analog is.
Inspired by.
Things were a lot less interconnected. So the scope for, the black market works. But also, like, there are other nations in the world, right? Like, these are the two large empires. Not only on Delmarin do we have a bunch of nation states holding on, but there is a whole rest of the world, I think, where the trade in wraithquartz could occur in different contexts.
Yeah. Now, I do have a notion, but I'd like to hear what your thoughts are first. What does wraithquartz look like?
Okay, so in my head, I was essentially imagining it as like some kind of fantasy crystal. I don't really know a lot about geology, so I'm not really sure how crystals work, to be honest.
Right.
And I was never very interested in it. So my only real source for like the visuals is either a crystal that a woman would buy to, what is that? The purple one or the white one? I think the white one's just quartz, isn't it? And the purple one is something else?
Right, here it is.
Yeah.
Could you, if you've got the ability to search,
yes,
look up creedite. That's Creedite. Now, for those of us who are just listening,
certainly can do this, yeah.
So creedite is described, so it's a lot of thin needle-ish like prisms. They're often in a sort of radial type thing. You even do find whole spheres of them, which just look really cool. They've got a spiky, not evil, but certainly not comfortable look to them, in my opinion.
Yeah, I was just looking at these pictures of this, and there's like different colors, and that works for me, yeah.
It's the shape, all these radiating, spiky, thin prisms that I think looks really cool.
I don't know how much it costs. I'll purchase one and then take a photo of it, and then we can put it in the PDF. And that's how you get past stealing people's photos.
For a little while, young Aaron was very enthusiastic about gemstones and semi-precious minerals. We used to holiday in this Victorian town called Mildura, and there is an amazing shop there called Woodsy's Gem Shop. It's huge.
That's so cool, Aaron. That's such a cool thing for a man to do. I'm just ribbing. I think actually it's very cool. I do like the idea of like crystals and gemstones and things. They're very pretty, and they look awesome.
They do. So I might see. I know we've got some local groups here. I might see if perhaps somebody local will allow me to take some photos of theirs, and you don't have to spend any cash dollars.
I hate spending money. I hate it so much.
Let's hear yours.
Let's hear mine. So I was thinking about the Cold War mentality of our great powers, because because our setting is sort of set around Heliakon, I think I want to keep everything. I think we've done enough sort of about the world outside of Heliakon, and I think we should focus a little more on this city and how things work here. I think one of the things that I want to talk about a little bit is what does living in a city that's been split in two feel like? I think that's an important part of it. Now, we keep calling it a partitioned city, and I'm not quite sure whether that's the right term, really. I know, Berlin was partitioned, but that's a little bit different because it was occupied by various powers. But this is a little bit different in that Heliakon was brought up from disuse from the time of the Concordate and sort of built up by the Great Consociate Empire and was then invaded by the Unfettered League. So this has a bit of a different feel. I suppose we could say occupied as well, right? I like saying partitioned because I think when we say partitioned, it sort of brings to mind more the feel that we're going for rather than occupied. And especially with some of the pretty iffy things going on in the world right now, Aaron, occupied just does not feel good. Doesn't feel good to say or think about. We're talking spy agencies. We're talking Cold War mentality. We're talking about a lot of mistrust in our societies. So both, I think, the Unfettered League and the Great Consociate Empire are fairly paranoid societies, and I think their paranoia is at its greatest concentration in Heliakon, right? I think you'll see it at different levels of society outside of that city and that area, but I think it really sort of comes to a head. And we talked a little bit about this, like in the Unfettered League, there'll be a lot of witch hunts of, are you a Stygiad council informer, blah, 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 blah. Then on the other side, are you a secret luminarchist, etc., etc. And yeah, I just want to have a little chat about that. I think when we talk about the city as a gameable setting and we set up mechanisms inside of it to have things like, yes, we have spies, right? We have a spy agency, and you did a really good job of doing a layers within layers within layers type of deal with the Stygiad Council. We haven't talked about the other side of it, and I think that's something that we can define later, but the kind of connection I want to make here is just the notion that the spy agencies during the Cold War, in a lot of ways, were a lot more incestuous than you would imagine. There was a lot of crossover of staff, ideas, programs, things like that than you would think. So I'm not going to go into detail about this because I think that's just something that you could read about if you want, and I don't think it's super interesting outside of the context of what we're talking about now. But I want to play with the idea that we have these spy agencies. We probably have a main one on one side, a main one on the other side, and then networks of spies and informants and things like that. But the thing that I want to make clear is that in some ways, the level of paranoia means that a player character or a person living within this world will never be exactly sure whose side anyone is on. There's a lot of fear and mistrust, and there's a lot of opportunistic finger pointing at people that you simply don't like. A lot of witch hunts, as it were. Like the witch hunts. Remember the witch hunts? The real witch hunts?
Given the era that you're talking about, the McCarthyism of the United States during the Cold War.
Exactly. You're going to get blacklisted because you might say a word that has COM in it, and that's part of communism. But, stuff like that. What do you think about that idea? And as well as that perhaps there's the level of infiltration in each society's spy agency is potentially extremely high, but you won't know.
My first thoughts on that is that the level of infiltration is nowhere near as high as people fear it is.
Yes.
But that the fear of who is a double agent and the effects that they can have and who's a triple agent, etc., is such that the relatively small numbers of it occurring have an effect far greater than their numbers should suggest they do, like they have through history.
Exactly.
One of the things that you haven't mentioned, and I know sort of in the back of your mind there, is that we do have this third theoretically neutral power in the Serpentine Guard, and the amount of outsized power that group must have.
Guard.
Yes, the Interbellum Guard of the Serpentine Wall. The outsized power that otherwise small group have, especially alongside these two spy agencies, you've got to admit that a great deal of their information gathering and work must perforce go through them to some degree. I'd be willing to bet that there are some of that is actually in the Bloody Avenues Agreement, and some of it is simply, it's been 25 years, I think we said. So,
25 years.
It's an entire generation. Some people have born and grown up and joined these spy agencies having only known this Cold War. So they've got a culture. I think one of the things that you and I might want to do, maybe not today, but actually talk about what is the culture. Because you're quite right. The spy agencies would be more alike with each other than they would perhaps with their fellow country folk, because they speak the same language, they have the same culture.
That's exactly
Speaking
right.
of culture, what are your thoughts on how, not just propaganda, but how each side defines themselves in existence in Heliakon against the other? Because that's the other real takeaway from the Cold War and this partition places.
Look, I think definitely the Great Consociate Empire feels, and I mean rightly so, that this is their city and their birthright, because they found it. It was either within their territory or territory that they found, and then they built up it and its infrastructure in order to have that as a, I don't remember whether we said that it was like a port city or a trade city or something like that, but it's quite an important city, not just because of its place as it was, the heart of the Concordate, but also because of, the money, the people that went into it from the Great Consociate Empire. Is this just justifying colonialism? A little bit, yes. Were there people living there around that area? Most probably, yes. And then from the Unfettered League, it would be that they are the liberators, right? Like that they come with their ideas of, more egalitarian society. You don't have to be dirt poor and selling yourself to a wizard just to make ends meet or whatever, right? And I feel like a lot of it would be ideology, right? Like the Unfettered League sees itself as anti-concordate, right? Because it was made up of all the peoples that were subjugated by that society and whatever ideals that we say that society had. But I think, I think we're talking about like some pretty nebulous ideas at the moment.
Well, I'd like to pin some of those down. That's sort of what today's about.
Let's pin them. Let's do it.
All right. So with the Concordate and thus the Great Consociates, we've already sort of established that they do have they've got a nobility, because that's where your conarchs of Heliakon have these sort of families. We've also established that they've got people poor enough to sell themselves to become osmotes. So that does play more into a nobility commoner sort of class. They've got this connection to the old Concordate, which is where I'd suggest a lot of the nobility comes from. They can trace their lines back to leadership within the Concordate.
I think also you suggested at one point that Lumara, which is the original island nation, was kind of a dumping ground in the Concordate.
Prison colony is what I suggested.
Prison colony, yeah. It was the Australia of islands, and that then those who became the nobility of the modern Great Consociate Empire were actually they were like the governors and like
wardens and free folks.
Of that society.
They would have been considered relatively low in the old Concordate. But,
that's right,
And you established in one of the tieflings in one of the other nations that they've got a nobility, and they've got the same name. It was part of the bank. But so that's
Benson
the Great
and
Consociate, one of the Bensons are a tiefling noble family from one of the nations that was swallowed up by the Great Consociate.
That's right.
So this idea that when the Great Consociate takes over a nation, it imposes takes the nobles of that group and makes them consociate nobles, probably to a lesser degree, but still nobles, and they have this strong class divide.
I mean, we're talking similar to the Roman Empire, right? Like it imposes its structures on a region.
Mm-hmm.
Like
I'd say even probably less egalitarian than the Roman Empire.
Less egalitarian than the the Roman Empire, yeah.
Where the Unfettered League then differs is in their, whilst they have nobility, they don't hold quite the same level of, like, they're not automatically in charge of things. They have elections to some degree. I'd suggest that they don't have completely free elections, that they're not, like, anybody can earn a position.
I was thinking, actually, in Polish history, the Szlachta, which were the nobles of Polish society, they would hold elections for a king, right? Like our kings were elected for a lot of our history. And of course, only the Szlachta could vote, and it was only from amongst their number. I would say that probably in the Unfettered League, it's a little bit similar, but I know we have another nation that I'm blanking on the name of that does voting in for a king, but everyone votes. But I'm not quite sure whether we want that for the Unfettered League as well, or perhaps like,
and that's actually where I wanted to separate them. That they're different in that regard. What I was actually referring to is a bit older than even the Polish ones. I didn't know about the Polish elector kings. That's very cool. I do wonder if that's where Warhammer Fantasy gets some of its idea.
The elector counts.
Yes.
I think actually there were like quite a few nations in and around that area that did fairly similar things, especially like during, you know what, I'm not going to pin it down because someone's going to tell me I'm wrong, so I'm just going to leave that nebulous. At some point, some elections happened in Poland.
Some of the first elections and democracies were, of course, in ancient Greece.
Is that how they made Euros?
No. So the one of the concepts of that time, however, of course, not everybody could vote and not everybody could hold a position, and only those with a certain amount of wealth could hold the highest position. They had the incredibly cool name of the Pentakosiomedimnoi.
That's so cool that you know that.
If I remember correctly, it's been a few years since I learned this, that it has literally translated to 500 bushels of grain a year or something like that.
I feel like not enough things come in bushels these days.
I completely agree. It's an underutilized word. And
I'd like a bushel of pickles.
I'll let you have a bushel of pickles. So
thanks.
Their idea that once you've got a certain amount of wealth, that you can then vote. Once you've got a higher level of wealth, then you can hold a certain amount of offices. And when you've got a greater amount of wealth, then you can hold the greater offices altogether. Crucially, in real history, for all of that feels very plutocratic and restrictive to those of us in relatively modern democracies. Although
hold on, that's what they're gonna have in America soon,
or now. Let's face it, given some of the changes to our own elections here in Australia.
Dang it.
But the crucial point was, at the time, it was considered remarkably egalitarian, because the thing about wealth being the measure is that people's wealth can be gained. It's granted a lot harder to gain wealth than people like to pretend that it is, and the wealthy do like to make it hard for everyone else. But the point was that you could go from being one band of individual and you could move up, whereas the prior system of nobles and commoners, that was it. Either you're born a noble and you're a noble, or you're born a commoner and you're a commoner, and never the twain shall meet, and certainly don't move from one to the other.
But in this perfect society that they created, if you just worked hard enough, Aaron, you too could become a landowner.
Well, you'd had to pull yourself up by your sandal straps.
Yeah,
which
sandals
used to be a naval term for something that was impossible to do. But anyway, so that's where I'm going to, returning back to Heliakon. The Unfettered League will present themselves as anybody can be our leaders. Anybody can join the council. Anybody can become, a district mayor. Anybody can become a governor. All they need to do is work hard enough, be lucky enough, and they can rule. Whereas in the Great Consociate, only those born to greatness can be great.
I love that. I love that very much. I think that works. And I think, that like the level of propaganda in the Unfettered League about this particular thing would be through the roof. I think that would be a very central part of the ideology that they are pushing.
I think I'd like to do something with that in a future episode, is talk about the propaganda of each side.
I do have some stuff written about propaganda in the Unfettered League, actually. So perhaps we could do something next episode.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what then. If you're going to do something with the Unfettered League, then I would noodle on the Great Consociate's equivalent.
Yes, but I'm going to cut this out of the recording because that now, do you know what we're doing? Colluding, Aaron. Colluding. This is collusion. Colossal collusion.
No, we're leaving it in
Galoshes.
because we're all about the Oh, you get to decide. You're doing the editing.
Actually, you know what? I think it's fine. I think this is part of I think this is part of the creative process. And this episode specifically, like, it is a more conversational one. We don't have the separate sections here. Yeah. So yeah, guys, this is how it works as well. Like you can have outside of the context of our very fun framework that we've set up for our mainline episodes. This is what collaboration looks like. It's just talking to people who you like, and sometimes people you don't like,
and saying yes wherever you can.
Yeah,
and if you want to expand on their ideas, but
one thing
they have expanded perhaps a little too much.
Yeah, we may have. It's an hour and a half, and we should wrap this up. I just wanted to say, actually, and I will fit this somewhere in the recording, that one of the surprises for me in this whole process was how much in World War words we are actually just saying yes and, because I did expect it to be a much more combative kind of thing. And I think that is because, especially in this one and in the pilot, we are very much on board. We're very much on the same page about where we're going with this.
I do have some notions for some bonus episodes where we're significantly more combative, like we build it into the episode.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Yeah.
For the moment, let's just roll with the fact that we both love each other so much. We're all lovey-dovey.
We love each other. I keep telling you, Aaron, that I am sending you my idea seeds, and you take my seed.
I do.
That's so awesome. I'm leaving that in the recording for sure. Let's say thank you to our listeners. Thank you, listeners, for sticking with us. This will be most probably, even after editing, quite a long episode. I will put the dregs of what I can recover from our initial weird recording at the end of this, and you will hear that after the cool music takes us out. Once again, you can have a look at the links in the description for this episode. There will be links to follow us on social media, no longer X, because, I mean, come on, the garbage fire of reality, as well as if you want to give us $1 on Patreon. It would be nice, because so far we are just doing this in our own free time, but it would be good for Aaron to finally be able to purchase that sock that frees him once and for all.
Yeah, something like that. I would also love to hear what you guys think of this more freeform episode. Do you like it? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Do you loathe it? Would you like us to do more? Would you like us just to keep it where we're at and just doing one every half a dozen episodes or so? Do you want us to just shut up and go home? Too bad, I'm already at home. This is where I live.
This is also where I live. Yeah. We live in different places, but
we do.
Yeah, that would be really good. I think as more people listen to this, the more excited I get.
I think we're in double digits now, aren't we?
We're in double digits. I think we're definitely in double digits. Yeah, but triple digits, not yet. But that's okay. I think that's a momentum. Anyway, do you want to say something really funny to take us out?
Something really funny to take us out? Oh, you mean like something actual?
Hello. If you have managed to stick around this long, then you can listen to about 15 minutes of our first try at this episode. It sounds very similar until lag kills it. Enjoy! Welcome. Ooh, we should have really discussed who's going to say welcome.
Probably. Tell you what, since I'm feeling very generous and magnanimous today, you should say welcome.
Okay. Welcome, dear listeners, to episode 7 of Mythtakes Happen, a world-building podcast where we build a world for you. Yeah. It's episode 7. Episode 7 is going to look a little different from our other episodes. Aaron, would you like to tell our listeners how it's going to look different?
So we feel like we've got more than enough material now to do a little bit of interlinking and deep diving. So rather than come up with brand new places and people and things and strange events, etc., we're instead going to bring up a few questions and connections between existing material, which you should all be able to check out in our PDFs below. There are links below each episode, and talk them out. So it's going to be a little bit more conversational. So we're not going to be following our usual format today.
Yeah, it's a whole new format, but the format is just talking. So I hope that this is something that we are good at.
Yes, and not some sort of squishy morass from which is what happens when you remove the bones of our show.
It's like a soft shell crab. Why?
Yes.
Why would God give them a soft shell if God did not want us to eat them?
I don't know. I was thinking more like, because I mean, bones on the inside rather than a crab with their bones on the outside. So we remove the bones from within our podcast. Do we just have sort of like a jelly-like mass of flesh?
What about Bones, the TV show, with Angel in it? I
very much enjoy it.
It has Angel in it.
It does, yes. David Boreanaz. He's amazing.
David Boreanaz, yeah. He's a really good-looking guy.
He is, yes.
Now, Aaron, I'm no common homosexual, but if David Boreanaz wanted to give me a little peck on the cheek, I wouldn't say no.
He is a tremendously handsome man. Charming, too. So, I think we distracted ourselves. We went from boneless to bones to this, so let's return
from
now.
From boneless to boners.
Yes, I really wish that wasn't as accurate as it was, but that is, in fact, the transition that we made. So, I'm going to take a drink because I apparently am thirsty.
You can do that. I also have a drink with me. It's in a mug that...
No, you've got to put it in your mug to drink it. Oh, I see what you mean. Oh.
It's it's a Starbucks mug from Qingdao.
Oh.
It's so good. I love Starbucks mugs. They all look nice. Right. Starbucks itself is pretty great too. This should be a Starbucks podcast.
No, because I've never been in one.
Really?
Yeah, I don't drink a lot of coffee, so I've never really...
Look, I'll get once you come to Melbourne, because I'm sure you will in the future. I'll buy you something nice and sweet from. It doesn't have to be a coffee.
That sounds nice. I must admit, I do tend to get mochas from those sorts of places, which are sort of coffees.
Mochas are good. All right,
great.
Let's get back to.
All right,
let's get back.
Let's do this. I believe, since it's an odd episode, that it's my turn to ask first, or am I remembering that incorrectly?
I don't really know. I think with editing, I remember that I'm editing this episode.
Yeah.
But
odd
I
episodes.
think you're starting. Yeah.
Odd episodes I start because I'm odd, and even episodes you start because you're getting even, I don't know.
Even more handsome in the flesh.
Which, impossible as it sounds, is in fact true. So
very true. Okay, you go. Tell me.
Although I must admit, given our sort of somewhat unusual shape of the episodes, I sort of wanted to give you an idea about what I wanted to talk about, just in case you've also got something similar on your list of things.
Well, let's have a look. I do have a short list, so if you tell me your list, and I'll tell you my list.
So the three... Actually, honestly, I don't know if we'll reach the third one. I've got lots for the first two, so I'm just going to drop that off now, and talk about the Winnowed and the
Brilliant. I have nothing for that. Cool. And in fact, all I really do have is short sort of really like a bullet point list of things that I'd like to talk about and kind of like work out with you in a collaborative way.
Mine's much more like that too. I think I mentioned you earlier today that I was having a little bit of creative constipation. So since I'm going to quickly talk about it since that's part of the idea of the podcast. A swirl of ideas, so many things I wanted to talk about, but they got stuck somewhere between here and here.
Yeah.
So in the end,
the old writer's block, the creator's block.
I tend to define that as when it's stuck up here. When I don't,
fair enough.
I don't know what the next step is, what I'm going to say, and so forth. This was more writer's constipation, where I had lots of things I wanted to talk about, and just it wouldn't organize itself in a logical way. So in the end, because we were doing the slightly non-standard thing, I also have a morass of notes, things I'll say, and questions to ask, and ideas. So, let's see how it goes. But
questions. I like questions.
I thought they would be useful today. So my two topics that I really want to talk about are gods and magic, or specifically wraithquartz.
Wraithquartz, yeah. Let's talk about it. My two main topics that I wanted to talk about are magic, like the rarity, difficulty, and scope, and the kind of mistrust and secrecy of that Cold War mentality that our two societies have together.
Yes. Well, might I suggest then that we leave wraithquartz and magic later, because it sounds like they're going to mesh together well and will probably end up being a whole thing. So rather than getting too lost in that, all right.
Let's not get lost. Let's hold hands through this dark forest.
All right, cool. So I'm actually going to start by reciting some of your words because they were really, really critical. I think they're the core of what we're doing with gods.
I love hearing my words.
So the gods are real. One can potentially learn the secret paths which lead to their divine realms and commune with the deities face to face. Gods are rarely eternal, however, and there are a few divinities in the world that claim to have had a hand in its creation. Theologians assert that the gods rise to prominence in order to fill archetypal role vacuums created by the passing, slaying, or banishment of other gods. It is claimed that the great heroes of the age became gods through extraordinary deeds which elevate them above the base natures of lesser folk. Academics argue that, in a way, each champion, reaver, adventurer, conqueror, and monster, and exemplar are set always on a path at the end of which lies the possibility of godhood.
Wow, I'm so articulate. I love that.
You are. It's good wording. So, what I wanted to talk about was the nature of gods, how their creation, their death, sort of how the mechanisms of their death and what that looks like and what it looks like when it doesn't really stick, and talk about the gods that we have introduced into the world already.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a great idea. I think that's something that I'm very interested in exploring. So yeah, let's have a talk about it.
Right. So this is what I wanted to sort of where I started with. So I read through that several times, and it's great. It's pretty, but it's also given us a very broad outline of what it looks like to be a god and how to become a god, and therefore hints at how you die as a god.
That's right. So
connecting it with some of our some of our first ideas about what magic is and what it's like. That magic is life and art and emotion, and that there's this other realm of magic from where it all comes from. Yeah. And there's this reciprocal cyclic relationship between sort of the really real world and the world of magic. And to me, gods are beings of magic, that they are sort of inherently connected.
Yes.
So my assertion, I suppose, is that in the realm of magic, that which is filled with things that are magic, life, art, emotion, that they sometimes form loci, like knots or vortices, which are these collections of thoughts and feelings and ideas about something, whether that something is a concept or a story or an explanation. And every time that somebody in the really real world like curses love or aches to once more be in battle or tries to explain why the seasons turn or the tides go in and out, they tell the story of a halfling that brought down the tyrant and changed it to fit the modern tyrant or whatever it is. All this constant and frenetic activity that is the nature of all sapiens, all this storytelling, for lack of I'm deliberately referencing, is what creates these knots, the archetypal role that you mentioned in your original text.
Okay, so in a way, I think what the kind of vision you have of this realm of magic, can we use a comparison to, like, not quite like the warp in Warhammer, because the warp in Warhammer is all just emotion, and it tends to be bad emotions, strong like that. But it's
but it is sort of like a different realm in which all of the ideas and the passions and the desires of sapient beings kind of gather or are reflected in.
Yeah.
Both.
Yeah,
that works.
They're sort of, it's a reciprocal relationship, so that it's they come from one another. They are always intertwined. You can't have one without the t'other.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So how do gods fit into this?
So one thing is, so you've got your story, your explanation. The winter comes because because spring is kidnapped by the god of death. Your classic Persephone and Hades story. And that's an explanation because people try to understand the world around them. It's one of those things that in the really well humans and in our world all sapients are always trying to do, because that's just the nature of sapience, is to seek understanding and we turn those into stories. And then by doing so, we make these vortexes in magic. And those vortexes, because it's reciprocal, they start affecting the world in very minor ways. So sort of the Sandman episode, The Dream of Cats. If you're familiar with.
Yeah, I remember it well. Yeah. That's very interesting.
So
that's yeah.
So that's
I think there's a little bit of a
first
lag.
layer. We do. So apologies for our listeners. So where I'm going from there is that once there's this sort of low-level reciprocal relationship, these vortexes want to grow. That's the nature of whirlpools and so forth. And they start drawing things into them. And the more that an individual reflects and resembles that explanation, that story, that entity, the closer they come to that vortex and they feed into it and are fed by it, which is why some of the great heroes are actually a little bit magical, not in a flashing cast a fireball kind of sense, just that the world is trying to shape them and the world around them to more fit what the magic is suggesting it should be.
So it's like a feedback loop
sense.
eventually, right?
Okay, I'm not hearing you if you're speaking.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Ooh, wow, yeah, we've got some serious fun lag, huh?
I think we do, yeah. Okay, well, it's kind of like a feedback loop, right? It's what happens. I think one of the things that you're suggesting is that with these archetypes, the more that a person or a hero, especially, sort of leans into that, the more, the easier it becomes to lean into it, right? Yeah,
they're self-reinforcing in that regard.
That's right. So, and eventually along that path, they will have become the apex of whatever that story or idea is, and have a chance to ascend to a higher state.
I'm sorry. I've got your voice layering over itself between long sections of silence.
Oh no. Oh boy. All right. Can you give me a second? I'm going to stop for a moment and I'm going to see if I can change my internet, okay? This might be on my end. Yeah. Give me a minute.